Hey there, welcome to Cheating Storytelling Channel, where I share real-life experiences. I'm diving right into today's tale, so let's get rolling. My name's Manuel, just a regular guy with a story to tell. About 7 years back, I crossed paths with Sylvia at a big product launch event in Milwaukee. She was handling logistics for one of the companies we partnered with, keeping everything on track like a pro. I was running the marketing side for my firm, full of ideas and energy. During the meeting, we butted heads. She pointed out a mistake I'd made about a delivery date, right there in front of everyone. It wasn't subtle, and I felt the room's eyes on me. Afterward, I pulled her aside to clear the air, expecting her to backtrack or smooth things over. Nope, she stood firm, cool as a cucumber, not rattled one bit. I'll be honest, it threw me off, but I kind of admired it. There was this spark about her, bright, quick-witted, and stunning in a way that didn't beg for attention but grabbed it anyway. That evening, we ended up grabbing a drink to talk it out. One drink turned into 5, and we were still chatting away, laughing over the chaos of the day. 3 months later, we were glued at the hip, like we'd known each other forever. 9 months into dating, Sylvia got a sweet job offer at my company, in a different department with a better gig. She jumped at it, excited for the challenge. Soon after, we decided to move in together, and the next year, we tied the knot. Sylvia was the type who juggled a million plans at once. Lists, goals, you name it. I loved that about her. She had this knack for taming life's messes, keeping us focused and moving forward. We'd sit down and map out budgets, chart our dreams, even sketch out a 5-year plan. It gave everything a sense of direction, like we were building something solid. At work, we didn't share a department, but our paths crossed plenty. Colleagues started calling us the power couple, and I wore that nickname like a badge of honor. We'd daydream about leaving the corporate grind someday, maybe starting our own consulting business, a project we'd pour our hearts into together. Back then, I didn't second-guess a thing. I trusted her completely, believed in what we had. But here's the kicker about trust. Once it starts to wobble, even just a tiny bit, you can't ignore the cracks. Looking back now, I see the first one showed up way earlier than I'd ever let on, even to myself. It wasn't some big, flashy moment, no shouting matches or drama. It was small, quiet stuff that stuck in my head. Like this one time at a team mixer, Sylvia shared a story about me booking a trip to Florida without realizing it was hurricane season. Everyone chuckled, and I played along, grinning through it. But she didn't stop there. She said I had to look up, "What do you do in a hurricane?" and genuinely thought hiding in the bathtub was a genius plan. The room roared with laughter. I kept smiling, but her next line hit harder. "Manuel's awesome in a crisis, if the crisis is picking pizza toppings." Ouch. A few people glanced my way, trying to gauge if I was okay. I brushed it off with a laugh, but deep down, something stirred. Another time, at a charity auction, she teased, "Manuel's version of budgeting is crossing his fingers and wishing the bills vanish." I didn't say a word, just tightened my grip on my glass and forced a nod. Then, at a fancy company dinner with her department's bigwigs, I mentioned we were thinking about sprucing up our kitchen. Before I could finish, Sylvia jumped in. "Let's see if Manuel can even switch on a drill first." Last time he tried to put up a shelf, I had to call my brother for backup. The table erupted in laughter. Even her vice president joined in. I sat there, smile plastered on, but it stung. That night, driving home, the silence between us was heavy. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her it felt like she enjoyed making me look foolish in front of others. She rolled her eyes and said I was overreacting, that it was all in fun. I brought up the drill comment, how it landed weird in front of her boss. She shrugged it off, saying it got a laugh and I needed to chill out. That word, Sensitive, she tossed it at me like it was a flaw. But it wasn't about being touchy. It was about seeing things clearly, hearing what she was really saying. She thought putting me down lifted her up somehow. What she didn't notice was that I'd stopped chuckling along. I was paying attention now. I didn't argue or push back. I just let it sit there in my mind, unforgotten. And she kept at it. Every time we were around others, it was like she flipped on a spotlight, and I was the easy target for her jabs. At home, things were okay, not amazing, but functional. We still planned trips, kept up routines, went through the motions of being us. But something had changed. She started staying late at work more, saying she had meetings or was networking with the higher-ups. I wanted to trust her. Really, I did. Then one evening, I decided to surprise her at her office with some tacos for dinner. When I got there, her assistant, Allison, looked puzzled. She told me Sylvia had left an hour earlier, mentioning something about a date night. I stood there, clutching a paper bag of food, feeling like the floor had shifted. An hour later, Sylvia walked in, cool as ever, tossing her keys on the counter. She said she'd forgotten she told them that and had actually gone for drinks with the team. I asked who she was with, keeping my tone steady. Derek from finance and a couple others, she replied, smooth as silk. Too smooth, maybe. I nodded, said, okay, but my mind was already turning. After that moment, she leaned in and gave me a quick peck on the cheek, acting like everything was perfectly normal. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to drift off. It wasn't that I had proof something was wrong. It was the sinking feeling that I was about to uncover the truth, and once I did, life as I knew it would change forever. So, I started paying closer attention, not in an obsessive way, just quietly keeping track. Whenever Sylvia mentioned staying late at work, I jotted it down in a little notebook. Every time she brought up Derek's name, I tucked it away in my mind, like a puzzle piece I wasn't ready to place yet. I didn't point fingers or lose my cool, I just listened, really listened. Then one Monday evening, around 11 p.m., she strolled through the door, humming a tune like she didn't have a care. I glanced up from the couch and noted she was later than usual. She slipped off her heels, grabbed a wine glass, and poured herself a drink, all casual-like. When I asked about it, she said it was Derek's birthday, and a small group had gone out to celebrate. I raised an eyebrow and asked if it was just a handful of people. She hesitated for a split second before nodding, saying yeah, just a few. That night, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. Her passcode hadn't changed, still the same old numbers. But when I checked her messages with Derek, the whole thread was gone, wiped clean, like it never existed. That's when a cold certainty settled in my chest. I didn't call her out. Instead, I reached out to my buddy Roy, who was at IT security, not the corporate kind, but personal, under-the-radar stuff. I kept it vague, just told him I needed a favor. Could he pull deleted messages from a cloud backup tied to Sylvia's account? He didn't pry, just asked for her login details and promised to handle it discreetly. For days later, an email from Roy hit my inbox with a file attached. It wasn't just texts, it was a whole collection of screenshots, video clips, and voice memos. I opened it up, hand steady as I clicked through. There were messages between Sylvia and Derek stretching back months, not just playful banter, but stuff that made my stomach turn. Talk of meeting up at hotels, chuckling about how I was none the wiser. One voice memo stopped me cold. I played it 3 times, hearing Derek's voice say Sylvia was clever for keeping me in the dark, followed by her laugh, saying I was too polite to suspect a thing. I sat there for what felt like hours, just breathing, letting it sink in. It didn't feel like my heart was breaking. It felt like a fog lifting, like someone had handed me a clear lens to see the truth. That's when I made up my mind. I wasn't going to spiral or lash out. I was going to come out on top. For the next 3 weeks, I built my case like I was prepping for a courtroom showdown. I backed up everything, printed out texts, saved audio files, and stashed it all in a folder I called Insurance, hidden in a drawer Sylvia never opened. I even tucked a small audio recorder inside the living room lamp, not crossing any legal lines, just being cautious, covering my bases. Then I played it cool, acting like nothing had changed. I even stepped it up, cooked dinner, asked about her day, smiled when she mentioned Derek, all while knowing exactly what was going on. She relaxed, thought she still had the upper hand. That was exactly what I wanted. I also met with a lawyer named Grace, a no-nonsense pro who didn't waste words. She listened as I laid out the whole story, taking notes without interrupting. When I showed her the evidence, she outlined a plan with laser focus. No rash moves, no big confrontations. I already had plenty to work with. I just needed to make it ironclad. Keep collecting proof, she said. Dates, patterns, timelines, anything to strengthen the case. So I did, patiently gathering more, building a solid foundation while staying calm. Sylvia had no clue I was on to her. Then came a game changer. I learned Derek was married. I tracked down his wife, Clara, and reached out, not with anger but carefully, through a private email with some of the evidence. She replied within hours, asking to meet. We sat down at a quiet cafe, neutral ground, and talked. She was composed, asking how long it had been going on. I told her almost a year. She nodded, saying Derek had claimed he was just mentoring Sylvia. Neither of us laughed at the lie. It wasn't funny. I shared what I had, and she didn't break down. She just looked at me and said we both knew what needed to happen next. We shook hands, like we'd sealed a deal, and parted ways. Things picked up speed after that. Someone, nobody knows who, dropped an anonymous tip to HR, then to Derek's boss, and even to the company's ethics hotline. The wheels were turning, and fast. What Sylvia didn't realize was that I wasn't just prepping for a divorce. I was dismantling the whole world she thought she controlled. The company was hosting a big quarterly leadership retreat at a fancy upstate resort, and Sylvia had scored her first invite. She was thrilled, packing her bags like she was headed to a battlefield, talking up how this was where careers got made. She mentioned the lineup of big shots attending, and I just smiled, asking if Derek would be there. She didn't flinch, saying, of course, he's a director. 5 days into the retreat, my phone rang, an unknown number. It was an HR rep, voice calm and professional, saying they launched a formal investigation into 2 employees for an inappropriate relationship. They didn't name names, but I didn't need them to, I knew. They said they were reaching out to spouses for background info. I gave them what they asked for, dates, timelines, names, all laid out clearly. When Sylvia got back from the retreat, she looked rattled, her usual confidence gone. I poured us both coffee, acting casual, and asked how it went. She hesitated, then said there'd been a complaint, probably some jealous assistant stirring up trouble about her and Derek. She watched me closely, like she was testing the waters, waiting for my reaction. I kept my cool when she asked why I wasn't more rattled, just shrugging it off with a simple explanation. If she hadn't crossed any lines, there was no reason for her to sweat it. For the first time, she didn't fire back with a quick retort, just stood there, silent, like the air had been knocked out of her confidence. The next week, HR dropped the hammer. She and Derek were both sidelined, put on leave while they dug into the matter. Their work emails got locked down, company phones were turned in, and the whole office buzzed with whispers. One morning, I caught her in the kitchen, staring into her coffee mug like it held all her regrets. She muttered about how unfair it was, how hard she'd worked to climb that corporate ladder. I nodded, slicing butter onto my toast, and said it was a rough turn of events. That's when she lost it, her voice sharp as she asked if I even cared that her career was crumbling. I met her gaze, steady as a rock, and asked if she'd cared when she was tearing our marriage apart. That stopped her cold. She walked out of the room without another word. Right then, I felt the shift, like the ground had tilted in my favor. She wasn't calling the shots anymore. She was floundering, and I still had my ace in the hole. 3 weeks after they got suspended, the company cut her loose for good. A brief, icy memo went out to staff. Violation of policy, breach of ethics, no names mentioned, but everyone knew the score. Gossip spreads like wildfire in our field. Derek got the boot too, and his wife, Clara, had already filed for divorce, sharing just enough online to start murmurs without turning it into a soap opera. By the time HR closed the case, Derek was untouchable. No company would go near him. Sylvia came home that afternoon, quiet as a shadow. No tears, no outbursts. She just sank into a chair at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the wall like it might give her answers. She said she'd find a way to bounce back, that she had connections and people who owed her favors. I just nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. The next morning, I handed her the divorce papers, calm and direct, listing irreconcilable differences, infidelity, and emotional harm. She didn't look shocked, just worn down, like the fight had drained out of her. She gave a bitter laugh, saying I'd planned it all, every move, waiting for her to crash. I corrected her gently. I didn't wait for her to fall. I made sure she stumbled over her own choices. She hired a budget lawyer to push back, but without a job, her resources were slim. I had everything lined up: texts, recordings, a digital trail that told the whole story. My lawyer, Grace, handled it like a pro, dismantling their case with precision. In court, Sylvia's attorney tried to spin her as a victim, saying she was under intense work stress and I'd been distant. The judge wasn't having it, cutting in to keep things focused on the evidence. We stuck to the facts, and when the ruling came down, I kept the house and the accounts. Sylvia walked away with far less than she'd hoped. She never figured out how HR got wind of things, or how Clara and I synced up our timelines, or how I ensured her downfall was quiet but final. Some say revenge is a messy trap that eats you up inside, but I didn't feel consumed by anger. I felt sharp, like I'd locked in on a target and hit it clean. When the judge read the final decision, I didn't gloat. I just thanked Grace, shook her hand, and left the courtroom without a backward glance. The real victory wasn't about what I gained. It was about what I held on to, myself, my sense of who I am. A month after the divorce was official, Sylvia sent me a text, asking if we could meet up just one time to talk. I stared at the message for a minute, then replied that I'd give her an hour the next day at noon, at a new cafe downtown. She showed up a few minutes late, wearing that same black blazer she used to throw on when she wanted to look like she owned the room. It didn't carry the same weight anymore. She thanked me for coming, her voice careful, like she'd practiced what to say. She sat down, looking me in the eye, and said she just wanted to understand how everything unraveled so quickly. I took a sip of my coffee and told her it wasn't quick. It was slow, deliberate, step by step. When she asked if I was the one who tipped off HR, I admitted it plainly. Yeah, that was me. Her face tightened, and she said I'd wrecked everything she'd built. I stayed calm, explaining that she'd done that herself. I just flipped the switch to shine a light on it. She looked away, then back at me, admitting she never thought I'd push back. I nodded, saying she'd built this idea of me in her mind. Quiet, easygoing, someone who'd just take whatever she dished out. She didn't argue, just sat there, letting the truth settle between us. I leaned forward and told her I hadn't ruined her. She'd exposed herself. It was easier for her to point the finger at me than to admit she'd thrown away something real for a fling with a guy who saw her as a side gig. Her voice dropped as she said I still sounded mad. I shook my head and told her I wasn't angry. I was free, finally untangled from the mess she'd made. She looked like she wanted to say more, but no words came, just a heavy quiet. Then she stood up and left the cafe. I didn't turn to watch her go. There was no need. 7 years ago, I met a woman who could make heads turn when she walked in, someone who seemed larger than life. That day, she couldn't even hold my gaze. I paid for my coffee, stepped out into the sunlight, and kept moving forward. It was done, not with a bang or a scene, just finished, clean and simple. For the first time in ages, that felt like enough.